time for silence is over.
Foreign hackers breached several U.S. government agencies, including the Treasury and Commerce Departments. Russia, who is believed to be behind this cyber attack, is denying any involvement.
Solarwinds products are used by hundreds of thousands of organizations worldwide, including the military, the CDC, major telecommunications companies, as well as Viacom CBS.
Where did you get this idea that President Trump trusts me or I trust him?
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Where did you get this idea that President Trump trusts me or I trust him?
If Russia or China or any other country has those emails, to be honest with you, I'd love to see them.
Where did you get this idea that President Trump trusts me or I trust him?
I think I would have a great relationship with Russia and with Putin. I met him once, and I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes. We were stablemate.
Where did you get this idea that President Trump trusts me or I trust him?
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia.
Where did you get this idea that President Trump trusts me or I trust him?
Does the Russian government have any compromising material on President Trump or his family?
Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows for sure.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to The Left Speaks. Today is December 20th, 2020. This week we discovered that Russia hacked a major internet technology corporation in the United States. Basically a company which provides the base programming for a ton of other major companies, as well as government agencies. President Trump, as he is demonstrated multiple times he will do, does not care or does not believe the cybersecurity experts in this country that work for our government, that actually know information technology, that actually understand cybersecurity, when they tell him that Russia was most likely behind this, that the evidence points to Russia doing it, that the style in which the attack was pulled off is historically the way Russians do it, and it's the same methodology. President Trump has already started looking for other people to blame. I'll give you two guesses which countries he's going to pick out of thin air. China. Because, of course, that's his go-to country to blame for anything, whether the evidence points there or not. Whether the evidence points there is irrelevant. All that matters to President Trump is that he gets along with his good buddy Vladimir Putin, and that if we have intelligence information that says that the Russians did something bad to us, let's just ignore it because President Putin told me that he didn't. I know I caught my son with his hand in the cookie jar, but he told me he didn't take any cookies. So obviously he's telling the truth. I know he's got chocolate all over his face. Cookie crumbs all over his clothes. I know that Mom is literally telling me she saw him take cookies from the cookie jar. But I'm going to ignore all that, and we're going to blame it on the neighbor kid down the street. Because I just don't like that kid, so why wouldn't I blame it on him? This is not the first time this has happened with regards to Russia and Trump. Now, I'm not going to rehash the whole Russian collusion Mueller investigation. That's public record at this point. You can go read most of it and buy it on Amazon. But it is fact that the intelligence community in this country, whether you believe it or not, believes that Russia hacked the Democratic National Committee during the 2016 elections. It is a fact that that is what the intelligence community believes. You know, people who have demonstrable expertise in gathering intelligence. It is also a fact that Trump has bounced back and forth on whether he believes the United States intelligence communities and the evidence they provide, or whether he chooses to believe President Putin, who was caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It is also fact that multiple members of the Trump campaign and close associates of President Trump either pled guilty for lying to the FBI about their connections to Russia, or were found guilty for colluding with Russia during Trump's 2016 campaign. Again, whether you believe it or not, those are facts. These people were indicted. In some cases, they were convicted. In some cases, they pled guilty. General Michael Flynn, of last week's fame for saying that we should declare martial law, was recently pardoned by President Trump after pleading guilty for lying to the FBI during that investigation. Whether you think he was railroaded or not, that's all irrelevant. I'm talking about facts here, not opinion. He pled guilty for lying to the FBI about the investigation into Russia's connections and meddling in the 2016 election. It is also a fact that the intelligence community in this country believes not only did Russia interfere in the 2016 election by hacking the Democratic National Committee and getting their emails, but that they also ran a cyber campaign to influence the election. Not to alter votes, but to encourage the way people think. And I'm going to use Facebook as an example, but this happened on Twitter, and this happened on multiple news forums. It happened on Reddit. It happened on all kinds of social media platforms, where basically Russia would fund people, lots of people, to go into these forums and spread false information and sow division among Americans. If you already believed something, they would encourage you to keep going down that rabbit hole. If you believe the opposite, they would encourage you to keep going down that rabbit hole. If you didn't know what you believed, they would spread bullshit to further confuse you. Now, this sounds like something new and like something crazy. It's not anything new. Where it is taking place is new. Online and social media communities. That part is new. But trying to confuse somebody that you view as your enemy, trying to point them in the wrong direction, trying to spy on them, giving them misinformation. These are all very, very old tactics. Extremely old. Every nation, every military, every people, every empire throughout history has used these things. Go back to the Greeks and the Trojan horse. Hey guys, we're all leaving. Battle's over. Y'all win. Here's a big gift. Peace. Misinformation. There just happened to be a lot of soldiers inside that horse. But go ahead and bring it in your city. Don't worry about that. Don't look at it too close. The United States has done this. Germany has done this. During World War II, if you were retreating, it was common, extremely common, to knock down road signs, to point road signs in the wrong direction, to have special soldiers who could pretend to be the enemy army and go in and confuse what the enemy army was doing. Every side tries to confuse and misinform and divide whatever group they view as their enemy. The two changes that happened this time around. Number one, it took place online. It took place in your Facebooks and your Reddits. This is the new battleground, just like this is the new place we do business. This is the new place we store information. If you're a spy, you don't have to sneak into some back room with filing cabinets in it and take pictures with little bitty cameras. You can sit at your computer now and get to those same files because they're not in filing cabinets anymore. They're on computers that are connected to the internet. I can sit in Russia and be in that same filing room in the United States of America. The one I used to have to be able to speak English to get into. The one I used to have to be able to get to the United States in the first place, and then pass as an American to get into. I don't have to do any of that anymore. So who do we rely on to protect us from this new threat? Well, we have experts of our own. Just like you had counterintelligence during the military campaigns throughout World War II, and in every military campaign we've pretty much ever had in this country, we have counterintelligence experts over here. Do I expect them to get things right 100% of the time with absolute certainty? No. No human is a god. But do I expect the President of the United States to listen to his experts in various fields? Whether it's healthcare during a global pandemic, or his cybersecurity experts during one of the largest hacks this country has ever seen? Yes. Call me crazy, but I would imagine that somebody who has spent a lifetime studying cyber warfare and has spent a lifetime studying counterintelligence and has spent a lifetime figuring out how those two work together would know more than a president who spent a lifetime developing real estate. Now, that's not a knock on Trump. I don't expect the cyber warfare guy to go build a multi-million-dollar development in New York City and do it as well as a real estate developer. But I also don't expect the real estate developer to understand computer code and cyber attacks to the same extent that the guy who spent a lifetime studying that does. People have fields of expertise, things that they study, and we go to them to borrow from their expertise when we have a question in that area. That doesn't mean we accept everything they say as the gospel. But if you're not a mechanic and your car starts acting up, you probably go to a mechanic or somebody who works on cars. Maybe it's a buddy that spent a lifetime working on cars. Whether he's professionally a mechanic or not is irrelevant. You don't take it to your barber and say, hey, my engine is smoking. What should I do? If your heart starts acting up and you go to cardiologists, doctors who study hearts, and the first one says, hey, you need heart surgery. Maybe you get a second opinion. If the second one says, hey, you need heart surgery. If you're really skeptical, maybe you go to a different hospital in a different state and get a third opinion. If the third guy says, hey, you need heart surgery, I'm betting you get the heart surgery. But I don't know anybody not one that goes to a heart surgeon and when they get told, hey, you need heart surgery, goes home and then calls up his mechanic and says, hey, what's wrong with my heart and do I need heart surgery? I don't know anyone when they have 3 cardiologists telling them they need heart surgery that decides to call up their realtor. Hey, Bill, you got me a great deal on that house last year. You seem like you really know what you're talking about with that housing thing. No, I don't want to sell my house. I've got an important question for you. You see, anytime I stand up, I start feeling lightheaded. My heart feels like it skips a beat. What do you think I should do? Now, I'd be willing to put money on this. Every realtor in their right mind is going to think one thing. Why in the hell did this guy call me? He doesn't want to sell his house and he doesn't want to buy another house. And then what they're going to say after a few minutes of silence is, I think you should go to a heart doctor. I think you should listen to what the heart doctors are telling you. They know more about this than me. This is common sense, guys. If your friend came to you and said, I went to the hospital, every doctor, all of them are telling me I need heart surgery. But the president of the hospital says, no, he thinks it's all in my brain. Is the president of the hospital a cardiologist? Does he have any expertise in the field of hearts? No. He was a really rich guy who built the hospital and hired the doctors. Why are you listening to that guy? We don't even know how deep this hack goes yet. We know it affects the CDC. We know it affects the National Institute of Health. We know that it affects Microsoft. We know that it potentially affects the Department of Defense and all the military units underneath that. We know that it could affect the NSA, the CIA, but we don't know the full reach. Solarwinds, to put this in a basic analogy, was like the river we get our drinking water from. If I pour some kind of contaminant or poison or pollutant or anything in that water that shouldn't be, that water goes a lot of places. It goes to your schools. It goes to your businesses. It goes to any military bases that happen to use it. It goes to decontamination plants before it gets sent out to some of these places. Maybe Las Vegas has a decontamination plant that filters this out. So Las Vegas isn't affected, but maybe further down south in Arizona, their decontamination plant doesn't catch this particular poison or pollution. So it goes out and it affects Arizona. But the point remains. They put this poison pill at the source. At the very beginning of where all of this is going to filter out to. We know some places weeded it out, filtered it out, and it didn't affect them. We know other places didn't catch it, and it did affect them. So at that point, you have two questions. What all has been affected, who's responsible? So we can stop this from happening again and punish those who did it. We're figuring out what all has been affected, but it's going to take time and lots of money. They are estimating this in the billions at this point to fix. U.S. intelligence communities have already figured out who is responsible. We just need a president that listens to them and accepts that. Their answer is clear. If we have to wait until January 21st of the new year with the new president, then we'll do that. But it's never a good idea when you're attacked to sit back and do nothing. On December 7th, 1941, when all the evidence said the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and all the military generals came to President Roosevelt and said the Japanese bombed us, he didn't spin the globe, point at a country, and say, no, I don't like this country. It wasn't Japan. It was Russia. That's not how any of this is supposed to work. You know it. I know it. President Trump knows it. So then the question becomes, why, when it comes to Russia meddling and attacking us through the internet, does President Trump always ignore U.S. intelligence and look for somebody else to blame? That's the question I have. Why on this particular issue, Russia, is it never a big deal? Or Russia didn't do it? Or I don't believe our intelligence community and I believe what the Russians are telling me? Why? Maybe there should be some sort of investigation to figure that out. Maybe there was some kind of investigation to figure that out. Maybe the House, acting as a grand jury, said, hey, there's enough questions and evidence here to go to a trial. That's called an impeachment, by the way. And then the Senate is supposed to act as the jury. And in jury trials, you bring in people to testify. You look at all the evidence. This is where we dropped the ball. We didn't bother to look at any of the evidence. I can't say with certainty, since part of the Mueller report is redacted by AG Barr. You can't read it. So I can't say with certainty that Russia has something on Trump, or Trump believes Russia has something on him, or that Trump did indeed collude with Russia. What I can say is that obviously there was enough there to warrant a trial, looking at the evidence in public. I can say there was enough there that the investigation needed to take place. And the investigation, when it's gathering all this evidence, that's what the investigation does. Then it's up to the Senate to actually look at it. And that didn't happen. And I can say directly to President Trump that when you know Russia attacked the Democratic National Committee in 2016 through the internet, and that's what it was, an attack, that when the intelligence community believes that they did their best to influence the 2016 election, maybe getting on national television and asking them, telling them that their help would be appreciated and providing dirt on your political opponent is not the smartest idea in the world. The president is supposed to put the safety, security, and well-being of this country, the United States of America, before his own. And I don't care. I don't care one bit whether it benefits him personally or not. The country is supposed to come first. So with those kinds of messages from President Trump, the, hey, it's cool as long as it helps me, guys. Hey, don't worry about getting caught as long as it benefits me, guys. Hey, you're my best buddy as long as you help me, guys. Yeah, I can imagine Russian intelligence getting the okay to go forward with this kind of operation, this kind of attack on the United States of America. Because, hey, it's not going to directly hurt President Trump. And he's already told us, long as we don't hurt him, and as long as we help him here and there, President Trump will cover for us. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back, everybody. Now, obviously, several other things have been going on this week, so we're going to touch on a few of them. We're also going to touch on a conversation I had personally with a conservative this week, and where, ultimately, I think our disconnect between the left and the right falls, but also several things that we agreed on, things that would make this country better. So, obviously, coronavirus is still a thing. We are looking at 315,000 total deaths so far. We're fast approaching our total of deaths for soldiers that we lost during World War II. We have already passed the number of soldiers that we lost in combat in Korea, in Vietnam, in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operations Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and the war in Afghanistan. Combined, not individually, you add them all together. We've lost more Americans to COVID-19 than we did in all those wars combined in combat. As you can see, we're still not making progress on this. We have vaccines coming, but we're going to need enough people to take those vaccines to actually make an impact. We've been dealing with a president during this that doesn't like to listen to experts and wants to live in his own reality. This started off not as a partisan issue. If you can recall, way back when we started locking down the country, Republicans and Democrats both at the state and local level were following CDC recommendations. It was not just Democrats coming out and saying, holy shit, a bunch of Americans are going to die. We should do what we can to prevent that. At the time, I was traveling for business, and I was in that deep blue state of Texas. That county locked down. You know, because Texas is so democratic. Mayors, governors, city councilmen, county commissioners, Republican or Democrat, wasn't playing a big role in their decision on whether or not they should follow basic precautions, like shutting down large places where people gather in big numbers, like shutting down non-essential businesses, like requiring or encouraging their citizens to wear masks so they quit infecting each other, like shutting down non-essential travel. Trump's the one that made this a political issue. It didn't have to be. Honestly, and this is just an opinion, had he not, with as close as the election was, I think he probably would have won this election. And as much as I didn't want that, I would rather have a few hundred thousand more Americans, American citizens, alive right now. But for some reason, telling people to ignore medical advice during the middle of a global pandemic where hundreds of thousands of your fellow neighbors and family members are getting infected and hundreds of thousands of them are dying, millions of them are getting infected and hundreds of thousands of them are dying, doesn't strike the majority of the American population as good leadership. Look, this was easy. If a pandemic would have hit, hey, that's out of the president's control. If I get sick, when I catch the flu, I don't blame Barack Obama or President Trump or George Bush. But in the middle of a global pandemic, you know, where my likelihood of getting sick goes way, way, way up, the virus isn't his fault. But our plan, or lack thereof, and what we do in response to it, those are his responsibilities. When your plan or what you do in response to something fails, well, it was your plan. To make a simple analogy, when we were bombed by the Japanese on December 7th, 1941, unless you're a conspiracy theorist, you don't blame President Roosevelt. That's not his fault. We blame that on the Japanese. They did it. But if he'd have come on national television, or national radio at the time, and said, hey, it's no big deal, guys. We don't need to take any precautions, like, you know, building the army, wearing uniforms, producing the supplies and material we'll need to fight this war, to protect ourselves and our interests. Just go about your daily lives. Pretend it never happened. It's a big Republican hoax. All of those things, and the response that we would have had we actually followed those statements, those would have been his fault. But that's not what President Roosevelt did. That's not what any good, decent president would have done. President Roosevelt got on the radio and addressed the nation in front of a full Congress. Flat out stated what had happened. That it was a day that would live in infamy, never be forgotten, and that our response would not be forgotten either. Laid out a plan with his best military experts, stayed briefed on that plan, and won a world war. Contrast that with what we've been doing under President Trump. Pretending like it's no big deal. Question from the chat. Kelvin, what would you have done different? The survival rate is 99.blank%. The survival rate from Pearl Harbor was probably 99.blank% too when you blanket it across the entire country. The virus isn't done spreading yet. I would have followed the advice of the CDC just like we followed the advice of military experts during World War II. You don't ignore people who are experts in their field. You might get second opinions, third opinions, fifth opinions, sure. But you don't politicize the issue. You don't call it a hoax by your opposition. It's a fact. It's a real thing. And we don't get to just ignore it. Other countries, both Western democracies and advanced democracies like South Korea and Japan, have handled this so much better than us. It's not even funny. They have less per capita dead. They have less per capita infection rate. They shut down for a while, universally. They got it under control. And then when they had a new case pop up, it was limited to a specific person, specific area. They could test those people and then test the people that those people had come in contact with. And then keep testing further out until they found where it had stopped. And put all of those people under mandatory quarantine until they were free of the infection. Now, if you want to make the argument that the United States is too big geographically to pull that off, I fundamentally disagree with you. I mean, after all, we did win a world war as a nation as well, and we were just as big back then as we are now. But at a minimum, when hospitals and hospital systems across the country are reaching 90 and 95 and 100% capacity in some cases, we are going to have to shut down some of these areas to spread out the cases that we're dealing with. This is no different than McDonald's. McDonald's might serve billions of hamburgers every year, but if I show up at one McDonald's and order 1 billion hamburgers, I'm going to break the system. They can't possibly handle that large of an order in one location. So the key is to spread out that order, both geographically, multiple locations, and to spread it out over time. I'm in favor of that which saves American lives. I'm opposed to ignoring reality and allowing American citizens to die needlessly. Do I think we could eradicate it purely with a shutdown and a quarantine? No. Do I think that we could thin out the number of cases that we're dealing with at a time so that people who are getting sick have a better chance of receiving the treatment that would allow them to survive? Yes. Do I think that we could reduce the number of cases if we stopped gathering in large groups and all wore masks? Yes, I do. And the science backs me up on that too. This isn't a matter of me being a medical expert and telling you what to do. I'm listening to the medical experts and following what they recommend. Mickey from the chat, follow the advice of the CDC. Trump could have required the use of masks at his rallies or wear a mask himself. I would alter that to Trump could have worn a mask consistently himself. I'm fine if you don't want to wear a mask at a press conference. I'm not wearing a mask right now. I'm in a sealed room. Nobody is within 6 feet of me. Speaking through a mask does make it harder to understand you. But there's nobody standing right next to me that I could potentially infect. And with as much as I travel, I try to be as safe as I possibly can. Unfortunately, the travel's not up to me. We can always do better, but the percentage rates of multiple aspects not to increase the number of suicides this has caused, the domestic violence increases. Do you really think, and I'm going to ask for a source on this, and if you don't have it right now, that's fine. You can shoot it to me via email or messenger or on Facebook, theleftspeaks@gmail.com or host@theleftspeaks.com if you want to email me. But do you honestly think that we have seen, what was it? 315,260 deaths from suicide during the course of this pandemic? Do you honestly think we have seen 17,592,760 cases of domestic violence? I'm not even asking for the increase, mind you. I'm asking for total number of cases. Even if I cut that in half, have we seen 162,000 deaths from suicide increase? Hell, have we seen it total in the same time frame we've been tracking COVID? I'm not advocating anybody go out and kill themselves, but I mean, let's be realistic here. You're trying to compare apples and oranges entirely. Did we lose some soldiers during World War II when we were fighting to keep America safe and protected and free? Absolutely. And while we didn't want to lose a one, we honor their sacrifice, but we didn't just pack up our stuff, go home, and pretend like it wasn't happening. And then the bigger danger to all of this and letting it spread like wildfire, and what we've already seen has happened, viruses mutate. This strain of this virus may have a 99% survival rate. And I don't know that I necessarily accept that number. But we just saw a new strain develop in Britain. It could develop to be more deadly or less deadly. But that's another reason not to ignore it. Not to give it more opportunities to mutate. and potentially become more deadly. I am curious, though, to the chat. How many deaths would it take before you actually took this seriously? Not even worried about the percentage. How many deaths would it actually take before this was serious to you? Before you were willing to make a small sacrifice, like wearing a mask? You know, the equivalent of having to put on pants before you leave the house to go out in public. Yeah, it's annoying. But I don't walk out in public all breezy and comfortable from the waist down. Right now, you don't get to walk out in public all breezy and comfortable from your chin to your nose. Which is like right here for those of you guys who want to wear the mask underneath your nose. From Kelvin again, no one said it's not serious or being taken seriously. The human body gets stronger off of each other. If you're referring to herd immunity, where enough people get it that eventually the population turns immune, yeah, we know that doesn't work with COVID. Your immunity to it only lasts, I think it's 3 to 6 months after you've had it. The antibodies don't stay in your system long enough. So that's not a viable option, which is why nobody has been seriously recommending it as we learn more and more about it. It's why the CDC didn't recommend it initially, because we didn't know for sure that that would work. A mask, we know, does work. It doesn't protect you from me if you wear the mask and I don't. It protects me from coughing or sneezing and transmitting my virus to you. Again, go back to pants. If I wear pants, or if you wear pants, if you decide to pee yourself, that doesn't keep you from getting wet. But it does decrease the chance that I would get wet. This is no different. As for not being taken seriously, the man called it a Democratic hoax. He ignored the advice of the CDC. He put his son or son-in-law on the committee who has no medical expertise, and he put the vice president in charge of his coronavirus action committee, or whatever he called it at the time, that again has no medical expertise. He hasn't required masks at his rallies when he was running for re-election. He's suggested taking disinfectants like bleach and surface cleaners and using them inside the body, along with sunlight. It might have been UV radiation, as a way to kill the virus. And if you're saying that you honestly believe that this is the best we can do, why are all these other countries doing so much better? America can be the world leader in damn near anything it chooses to be. And I didn't want to be the world leader in COVID deaths per capita and COVID cases per capita. I would have rather have been the world leader in COVID response, which right now, I would argue we have a C to a D in. And if you're a student in high school or college or middle school, or if your son comes home from first grade with a report card that straight C's and says, "Mommy, we're number one," well, that doesn't really hold a lot of water when you find out that a whole bunch of other kids in the same class on the same planet have A's and B's. So no, I don't think that the majority of this country is taking it seriously. And no, I don't think the American response has been very good. We've given out, what, $1,200 to last you 32 weeks at this point? When again, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, South Korea, Japan are all helping their cities, are all helping their people and citizens and cities survive through this. And don't tell me it's too damned expensive and can't be done. If you taxed the 1% in this country, you could send every American in this country a check for $3,000 right now, and they would still be richer right now after that than they were before COVID started. It's always mutating, right? So we make each other stronger. Less than 1% are of dying, or 1% chance of dying. Is that living in fear? Wash your hands, stay your distance, wear a shield if you fear it that much. The whole world over 1%. If I take that and just apply it to World War II, it's less than 1% that are dying. Just ignore it. Pretend like it doesn't exist. Hey, if you're so scared of the Nazis and the Japanese, go buy yourself a rifle and handle it your damn self. Kelvin, this is where you and I appear to differ. This is not an individual problem any more than World War II was an individual problem. This is not a singular state problem any more than World War II was a singular state problem. This is a national problem. National problems require national leadership. And to paraphrase from a show, I know this is true because Florida or Texas didn't go off and win World War II on its own. This is affecting the entire country. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are dying. And to pretend like it doesn't exist and to put it all on the single individual to protect themselves and buy biohazard suits and walk around disinfecting everything, to me, is simply absurd. You might as well be proposing that everybody go buys their own camouflage, their own rifle, and their own bullets to sign up and go fight the Nazis. But the federal government doesn't need to get involved. This is a nationwide problem and a worldwide problem. And it's going to require a nationwide response and a worldwide response. Looks like just around 205,000 suicides this year at a glance. Fair enough. I understand I asked you a question on the spot. That's why I was going to give you a chance to research it because I don't have time to verify your number. But even if I accept that as true, what was the percentage of suicides the year before? and it's still not anywhere near the number of COVID cases. So to pick a number out of thin air, if we had 100,000 suicides the year before, you're still looking at a lower impact on suicide death rate than you are on COVID death rate. That's what I'm pointing out. Capitalism is another thing that needs changed. Oh, that's 100% agreed. $1,200 is complete trash. Capitalism is another thing that needs changed. That's all from Kelvin. Capitalism needs to be regulated. I think capitalism works extremely well in the areas where it fits. There are certain things that we shouldn't be running for profit because for profit isn't the best model for it. We don't run the military for profit. The military is a service that our government provides to protect its citizens. We don't run fire departments for profit. The fire department doesn't come knock door to door and say, hey, would you like to purchase some fire department insurance so that if your house catches fire, you can call us and we'll show up? Because again, that's something that can affect an entire neighborhood. If your neighbor's house catches on fire, it's probably a bad idea. And you don't want the fire department showing up and saying, we're going to let that one burn. But if it starts to catch your house on fire and the house 3 houses over, then we'll start spraying water. That's not the way we do things. I think way too much money is going to the upper 1%. And I think there are certain things that we are trying to apply capitalism to where it is simply not the best model for that particular service or outcome. Healthcare would be a prime example. I don't think healthcare should be for profit. I don't want a child, or anybody for that matter, being told that they get to die because they don't have enough money. Do I think capitalism should be abolished entirely? Certainly not. Like I said, it works extremely well where it works. The other problem that I have with our current state of capitalism is that everything has combined into monopolies, which capitalism is naturally going to head towards. Well, if you have a monopoly, you no longer have competing businesses. And when the barrier to entry, the amount of money required to compete with one of these major businesses, is prohibitively expensive, that's a major problem. One of the big advantages of capitalism is supposed to be innovation that comes as a result of competition. And if there is no competition, then there's no need to innovate. And I think we're dealing with that in several areas right now. You can't apply this to World War II. That was a physical enemy, and this is a virus. A virus is a physical enemy. You can literally see it under a microscope. Just because you can't see it with your naked eyes doesn't remove the fact that it's a real thing that is physical. Those are too far extremes. This is also from Kelvin. Those are too far extremes. This is literally protecting yours from a virus that comes from anything. Japanese troops at your doorstep is different from getting sick going to Walmart. Walmart never had a mass corona outbreak, or Target or Best Buy. Interesting. Might have something to do with them requiring masks for you to come in. But I know a lot of the businesses, I believe it was Tyson Foods, that were lax on requiring masks and such, did have massive outbreaks at production facilities, etc. So, look, I'm not saying you can shut everything down. Obviously, people got to eat, right? That makes perfect sense to me. Somebody's going to die of starvation before they're going to die from coronavirus, even if they catch it. But if I give somebody coronavirus poof right now, and I take away all their food in the same moment, I think the lack of food is going to get them first. So we do have to be realistic, and it is a balancing act. But that being said, I don't see how it's all that much different. It's a worldwide enemy. It's killed almost the same amount of American citizens at this point. This isn't a physical death threat. You can't see it. You can. Go buy a microscope. Go get your degrees in microbiology and go work at the CDC. Just because you can't see it with the naked eye doesn't mean it didn't happen or it doesn't exist or that nothing can be done. If I had been alive on December 7th, 1941, unless I happened to be in Pearl Harbor, I wouldn't have physically seen that either. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. And that doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be a federal response. This is something that is affecting the entire country and the entire world. Did we ask individuals to do their part back then? Absolutely. Donate your cans, buy war bonds, sign up for the army. Turn out your lights. Blackouts. Especially if you live on the coast. So those German submarines can't use your city for navigation. Especially if you live in Britain. So that the bombers flying overhead from the enemy can't see your position. These were all nationwide responses where we counted, yes, on the individual to do their part, but they were driven from a federal level because it affected the entire country. You turning off your lights probably isn't going to have that big of an impact individually on those bombers flying overhead. But if we require everybody to do it, it helps. Quit letting perfection be the enemy of better. Nobody is saying if we require everybody to wear masks, that coronavirus is magically poof just going to go away. That's not what anybody is advocating. Any more than if everybody turns out their lights, the German submarines and bombers during World War II were going to poof go away. But it would minimize their impact. It would minimize the number of dead British citizens, minimize the number of dead American merchantmen on ships. And these were things that were required by your government because we were dealing with a worldwide, global enemy as a nation. "99% is greater than 1%. Yes, but you're ignoring the scale on the 1%. The consequences to you are inconvenience. And you are weighing your inconvenience with somebody else's life. And I'm sorry. I don't care whether you're inconvenienced if somebody else gets to live. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you, folks. Welcome back. We're going to touch on coronavirus briefly, and then we're going to wrap up the show. Probably about 5 minutes left or so. Thank you for hanging in there. Last bit I wanted to say. Again, from the CDC, let's look at the cumulative deaths, the total number of deaths reported due to COVID-19. I'm sorting it by the total. We're number one. I don't know that we should be proud of that, but we are. Brazil, India, Mexico, these are not countries that I would typically compare the United States to. They're simply not. We would refer to them not as third world countries, but maybe developing nations. They don't have the same infrastructure we do. They don't have the same economy that we do. They don't have the same level of medical expertise that we do, etc. Got the United Kingdom, France, Russia, Germany, all doing much better than we are. That's on deaths. Total number of cases, again, we're number one. Again, up there with India and Brazil. This is not something to be proud of. If you're telling me that we can't do better than this, if you're telling me that this is what America is capable of, I fundamentally disagree. I think we are better than this. And I think we can do much, much better than this. If you're telling me that you're not willing, for the sake of your convenience, to have the United States not be number one in the world in COVID deaths and number one in the world in COVID cases, my only response is I don't give a damn about your convenience at this point. People's lives are at stake. And if you have to be required to wear a mask, tough. We already require that you wear pants in public. We already restrict where people can and cannot smoke cigarettes in public because it affects other people's health. When it comes to public safety, we already have rules about what you can and cannot do. You don't get to drive on the left side of the highway just because it's more convenient for you. You have to drive on the right side of the highway like everybody else because it keeps everybody safe. Does it eliminate accidents 100% entirely? No. But is it more safe than letting you go the wrong way down the interstate for both you and everybody else? Yes. Did we always have laws saying where cars could and couldn't drive? No. Did we realize it was a problem and figure out, maybe we can do better than this? Absolutely. This isn't 99% being inconvenienced. So 1% can have a slightly more convenient life. This is 99% being slightly inconvenienced so that 1% can live. The two are not equal. They're not even close to equal. And if you're going to ask me to deprive other American citizens of their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because they can't do those other two things if they're dead, so that you don't have to be inconvenienced, I'm not willing to do that. It's that simple. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next week.